Welcome back, everybody. Let's get right into it. Before we begin in earnest, just a warning. This is peak Spider Town, so again, if that's not your thing, then please don't watch this video, because we are going into some serious spider shit today. With that out of the way, let's continue. Every time you come out from this entrance, you sort of need to brace yourself for an immediate swarm of homing soul arrows, so forgive me if I'm a little cautious. The way to proceed from this bonfire is through this door. It's a little difficult to see, and you sort of need to make a mad dash for it to not get owned by the white mages up above. But if you're quick about it and you pre-open the doors like I should have, then you're not in a lot of danger. There's also a little secret back here. In the chest is the Crescent Axe and Soul Vortex. The Soul Vortex is a spell we can't use, but the Crescent Axe is a pretty interesting weapon. How do you get down here? Well, that's 2 for 2 on not getting that lizard to explode in my face, so I guess I'm either lucky or unlucky, depending. Now, the way forward, as I mentioned in the last video, is across that walkway over the spike pit. We still have to fight through this little area, which, depending on the placement of player statues, can actually be difficult. I think it's a cool conceit that the deaths of other players can sort of affect you in your game. I mean, if it's really a problem, you can just break the statues, but still, asynchronous multiplayer. It's pretty cool. I like it. Oh, that is a rare find, and a valuable one too. As I mentioned before, the Tseldora set will increase all of the souls that you gain. Now, we're going into a pretty serious battle here, so I'm not going to equip it just yet, but we'll show it off later. The geology of this place is pretty interesting. And by pretty interesting, I mean, what the hell is going on? I'm going to be using the crossbow instead of the great bow today because I was starting to run low on great arrows, and those things are pretty expensive. And at this point, we don't need to actually kill anything with ranged attacks, we just need to get their attention. Well, that's pleasant. Alright, so rushing into this room without looking up is basically certain death. A couple of spiders at once is not a big deal, but an entire horde of them in this open area without much of a bottleneck to use except for the front door, that's a different story. It's much better to take it slow, shoot them down, and take them out one at a time. Fatty ahead. Required for treasure. Now, that is probably the primary drawback of the ranged attack on the Dragon Slayer Spear. The damn thing's already broken, or just about. So, let's switch to something else. In fact, let's try the Crescent Axe we just got. The Crescent Axe is a sort of hybrid between a halberd and an axe. It has extremely long reach for an axe, but it's also pretty heavy and somewhat ineffective at short range. It's also too heavy to wield one-handed at the moment, so we're going to need to two-hand it for a bit. It does a little bit of bonus magic damage, but not a huge amount. It's mostly a physical weapon. It's pretty versatile if you have the stats to use it properly. Not so much in tight spaces, though. We have to lure this guy out a little bit. Even unupgraded, it's pretty strong. It does, however, take Twinkling Titanite, so it's competing with a lot of other cool weapons, so the opportunity cost to using it properly is sort of high. Every time I pick up a weapon like this, I think, I really wish this was Dark Souls 1 and I could just buy Twinkling Titanite. Oh well, it was not to be. This is what I meant about Spider Hell. This final stretch here is packed with nothing but these spiders and their webs. They'll drop from the ceiling, they'll climb out from under things. It's just, I'm not that bothered by spiders, and this area still is kind of difficult for me, to be honest. However, we can see the fog door from here, so we're near the end. Since the web is sticky, you can't move at full speed on it. The sloped nature of this particular bit of webbing also makes fighting on it a little difficult, especially with a weapon like this Crescent Axe. Having finally reached the bottom, there's a couple things to note down here. First thing to note, spiders hate fire. In fact, if you use a torch, a lit torch I mean, you can actually sort of... It has the same effect on spiders as does dark lurkers from No Man's Wharf, except, honestly, it's probably a stronger effect. But at the same time, spiders are not nearly as dangerous as the dark lurkers were, so... I'm sorry, dark dwellers. The dark lurker is something entirely different, spoilers. And I know it's not a dark stalker, because that's a big-toothed serpent. So the primary thing of note on the bottom floor is the summon sign for Ashen Knight Boyd. He is an NPC summon that will always show up here if you have trouble with the boss. He wields a thrusting sword and a small shield. Now, in preparation for the upcoming boss, I'm going to switch out my loadout a little. As you probably should. What can I say? I think the old sun ring is funny. After some deliberation, I decide that we're going to switch back to the Black Knight Halberd. After we take out one last spider that was hiding behind this pillar. There's a lot of them down here. This guy looks pretty badass. At first I decide that I want to go it alone, but after some more deliberation, I decide that the boss run to this place is really annoying. So I'd rather have some help just to make sure I don't have to do it again. Besides, I'm of the philosophy that if somebody leaves a summon sign, you should probably take it, unless there's a compelling reason not to. And in this case, there's really no compelling reason not to. This guy is wielding the great sword and the royal kite shield, along with a very imposing set of armor. Alright, this is the third great old one, the Duke's dear Freya. The first order of business in this fight is to get rid of the tiny spiders. Seriously, do it. Much like in the Royal Rat Vanguard fight, leaving those spiders alone is bad news. Now, for Freya herself, she has two weak points. She has two heads on either side of her body. Her most common attack is probably that white laser beam that we saw. Why does she have a white laser beam? Why do spiders have lasers? I don't know. Or I don't know yet. Aside from the laser beam, Freya will attack with her pretty formidable legs, and also just go for the normal kind of spider bite sort of thing that spiders are known to do. She'll also spit some corrosive goo. And some webbing. I'm pretty sure that's not how spiders normally do webbing, but given that she has a mouth on both ends, maybe that's just how it works. Freya's pretty weird. Far and away the best time to attack her is when she does her laser beam. Just sort of run around to the other head, which won't do anything as long as she's firing the laser. And then sort of get stymied by weird hitboxes. That's probably the biggest difficulty in this fight. Her armored carapace will block a lot of your attacks. Her only vulnerable points are her heads. If you have elemental damage or armor piercing, you can get through to her main body, but it still does a lot less damage. And finally, our friend Hercules decides to do something. He's mostly just been sitting in the background using tokens of fidelity, which is not unhelpful, but if that was all he was going to do, I would have rather gone it alone, because it doesn't really make up for the fact that now everything in this place is buffed up. Still, if you can get a clear shot, the halberd works wonders. Freya is very weak to fire, like all of her spider children. At least I'm assuming they're her children. There's a lot about the anatomy of this creature that I don't understand, let's be honest here. This attack is fairly rare. she'll sort of flail around and spit corrosive goo. Just, if you get directly to her side in the gap between her two sets of legs, then it's pretty safe. The other thing about Hercules is that he's using tokens of fidelity at times that they're really not necessary. But it took a little while longer than I would have liked, and our summon phantom was not as helpful as I would have liked, but we made it through in the end. And oftentimes the summon phantom is just as in need as help as the person who summons them, so it's good to help people out. Now that we're done with that fight, let's switch to an equipment set that's a little more appropriate for smaller enemies. Curiously, you have to pick up the Great Soul of Freya. If it's even her soul at all. Is it the soul of that dragon, maybe? It seems odd that one of the great souls of the land of the great old ones would just be in a giant spider. Hey, buddy. Hello? Everything okay? Nope, he's just a hollow. Fuck him. Presumably, that was the Duke for whom the Duke's dear Freya was named. He drops a couple of nice things, including a dark quartz ring +1. He also seems to have a small replica of that device we found in the Lost Bastille ship. It's got a pretty swanky private room here. Tea sets, ominously broken cage, bunch of gadgets, pretty cool. Now there is one final challenge waiting for us between us and the Primal Bonfire, and that is Vengarl's body. Now, while when he was whole, I'm sure that Vengarl was a fearsome warrior second to none, but without any sensory organs to speak of, this hulking monstrosity is not a threat. His attacks do a lot of damage and can cause bleeding, but they won't get through shields, and he is stupendously vulnerable to backstabs. It helps when you fight to be able to see, hear, or smell things. He drops the rest of Vengarl's set, which is a pretty nice set of heavy armor. That's Brightstone Cove almost entirely cleared out. Let's talk to the Herald.
Seed, bearer of the curse. It is the only choice left to you.
I see. I mean, there really is nothing stopping us from just, sitting down on a rock next to old Gilligan, chatting about the old days. Talking about that time we killed a giant spider. Down in Kale's domain, we find that another flame has lit up far to the north. We're making progress on this map and in our journey. Next time we're going to fill in some loose ends. But until then, I'll talk to you later.